Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I'm making sure that I have disabled the waiting room, so everyone should just be able to join without me having to let them in. Looks like we've got a good turnout. If you have joined us before for webinars, you know how much I love to hear where everyone is calling in from and how they heard about this webinar. So if you would enter into the chat where you're calling from and how you heard about us, we would love to learn a little bit more about you. We'll wait another minute or so before we get started, just to let everyone come in and settle in. I am Amy Bowler. If you have joined us before, you have seen my face quite often. I am an admissions counselor here at Sunrise RTC. I have been at Sunrise for 6 years and started on our residential team, and now get the joy of working with families in the admissions capacity. And I love our program, and doing the marketing and outreach for it is so fun. And I also am the type that likes doing these type of webinars, so I get to host it every couple weeks. So it's a lot of fun. But yeah, please type into the chat where you're calling from. We want to get to know you. There's a few names on here that I recognize, like I'm probably gonna butcher this, but Soliana Silva. If I'm remembering right, she's calling from a South American country, if I'm remembering correctly. That was from a few weeks ago. We got Hillside. Thank you, Jason. Your team did a great job representing our last webinar, so we're glad that you made it on this one. Shannon from Spokane, Washington. I love Washington State. And she heard about these through the listserv. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Those of you who I'll type this into the chat as well, or actually I'll have Marcy type this into the chat. She's on the admissions team with me. But for those of you who get the invites from the listserv, I'm going to make sure that we post the webinars and the slides and the links for all of the past webinars on the listserv by the end of next week. If you do not get that link for whatever reason, and you want links to previous websites or to the previous webinars, excuse me, please email admissions@sunrisertc.com so that we make sure that we're getting you all of the links. And that really goes for anyone. So if by the end of next week you have not seen this video or the links to all of the previous webinars, please email admissions@sunrisertc.com, and we will make sure that we get you those links and the previous slides and everything that you would need for it. So on that note, let's go ahead and get started. A couple of housekeeping things. We ask that you stay muted the entire time. We will have an opportunity for question and answer at the end. So any questions that you have throughout the presentation, please type them into the chat box, and then I will field them to our presenter, Brad, at the end, and make sure that we aren't missing anything. We are super excited to have Brad with us for today's webinar. Brad Simpson is a doctor of social work and the executive director of Sunrise RTC. He came to Sunrise 14 years ago after working in many different capacities in the mental health field, including the Department of Children and Family Services and Marriage and Family Therapy. Brad was intensively trained in DBT 11 years ago and has done numerous trainings since then, including a 4-day mindfulness retreat with Marsha Linehan. Brad loves his family, loves to exercise, and can be found wearing flip flops 365 days a year. Brad, go ahead and take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Amy. And thanks everybody for joining us. This is our fifth and last webinar from our series. And I know many of you have been on the previous ones, so we're grateful that you've joined us for that and been with us. And hopefully today will be helpful. We thought this was a great way to end, was to talk about Zoom fatigue, since you've been joining us and probably getting some Zoom fatigue just from attending webinars all day, or like you have. That's how I've felt a bit, at least as we go through. But anyways, let me get my slides up. But it's interesting as we talk about, and we're doing more and more through telehealth and through those means. I had a colleague of mine, and Amy, you've got to enable my ability to screen share. So I had a colleague of mine, he's like, I just wish I had travel back because I'm so tired of doing all these Zoom meetings. He's like, I think there's something really wrong. And then he was reading through an article, and that night he sent me an article from the National Geographic on Zoom fatigue. And he's like, see, I knew there was something that understood what I was feeling and going through and experiencing. And so many of you have probably felt similar, as you've taken your practice on using telehealth. I know most of you have done that. Some are still doing that. Some have gone back to some in-person things. But as we've all tried to adapt with COVID-19 and provide services, we really have had to adapt to using Zoom and the telehealth means, whatever it is, if it's Zoom or some other via video conference that you're using. So it's interesting because we know that it's been really nice doing these webinars. I've loved hearing from each other, because what I've learned is essentially what's maybe been some of the benefits of what we're doing, and then what have been some of the challenges, the barriers that we've run into. And I think that's probably what's been most interesting with all of it, is being able to hear that. And it's actually opened my eyes a bit to some of the benefits. And so we'll talk about some of those. We'll talk about what have been the benefits, what have been some of the barriers. But then at the end of the day, how do we really combat Zoom fatigue using DBT? And those that are on the listserv, there have been some really great resources on the listserv. So my hope today, as we go through together, is to orient you and reorient you to some of those resources that are available there, and then hopefully reorient you to some or orient you to some other resources that I think will continue to be helpful as you're, again, working to adapt with some of the barriers we have with COVID-19, and adjust to some of the opportunities that we've been given and be able to view them that way. And so we'll kind of go through that today as we're going through everything. But again,
thank you. Should be good to share your screen.
Okay, I think we've got it now. Thanks for joining us and being with us. And anyways, we'll get through this together. So as we're going through, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I know Amy will monitor those, and then at the end, for sure, I'll address them and throughout if possible. So I found this, and this took me back. But when you think before the time of having Zoom, this was what we knew. At least this was at least the most familiar thing we knew to what we deal with Zoom right now. And in Zoom, there's different views. There's gallery view, which you can see everybody. There's speaker view, which just highlights the speaker. But let me show you, this may have been many of you, your first interaction with Zoom was this little group here. And you can, if you remember the Brady Bunch, right? How many of you watched the Brady Bunch, ever was oriented? But this is how they started the credits of the Brady Bunch, or it ended. I can't even remember. Some of you know better than I do, I'm sure. But this was it, right? They had some fun with showing these different boxes that everybody was in. And you can already see some of the limitations of the different boxes, right? All I can typically see, and it's the same for all of you that are on with us that have your video on, some of the limitations I can already see what they are. I have multiple people that I'm looking at, And the problem is I can only process and look at one at a time. And so I find myself trying to scan every single box. So already you can see where some of the fatigue might set in. I'm trying to look at every nonverbal that exists with the Brady Bunch right now, and I'm trying to scan those. And if I look at it enough, how many times do you have to watch this replay before you actually see everybody's reaction that occurred within that 2-second period? Do you notice that? It's all it's doing is replaying every 2 seconds. But how many times are you having to scan, and how many times is this having to replay for you to see everybody's reaction or response? So you can imagine in that 2-second little video clip that you've got going, you only catch probably one or two of actually the nonverbals that are occurring. And it's kind of fun because they're all looking at different directions. Actually, it looks like they're looking at each other, even though we know they're not, right? But you can see all this that's happening. The other limitations that you can see is, as I'm trying to take this in this 2 minutes, okay, finally, maybe after the 6th time or 7th time, I actually think I know what everybody's doing. Anybody feel like they got it before the 6th or 7th time? And if you did, you are well versed in Zoom. So congratulations. Your processing speed is higher than mine. But what I think is interesting with this is now as I try to scan and see everybody, the other thing I'm limited to is I can only see their heads, right? And with most of you that are on video, I actually can't see your hands. You can see my hands occasionally if I raise them really high. Do you notice that? Otherwise, I'm actually moving my hands right now and you have no idea. So the other thing that we know is really taxing with Zoom, and this is where that term Zoom fatigue comes from, is here I am with these nonverbals that are occurring. In fact, even right now, I'm moving my hands and you don't catch my nonverbals because it's not in the window, right? And so that's the other thing we know that's happening with Zoom fatigue is your vision and your ability to see what people's nonverbals are limited, right? So now you're also straining or trying more to catch on to, okay, what do I see in the picture? And then I'm also trying to pay attention. What if the research has found people, because of that, because the nonverbal is so limited, they're actually straining more to hear words and pay as close verbal attention as they can. And so you can see how I'm going to try to focus on the person speaking, but I also know that there's other things happening in all these other windows. And again, you can see how the fatigue might start to set in, right? And some of the limitations to that. So Amy just spotlighted my video. So now you only see my slides, right? And my video, and you're not seeing everybody else. So already that reduces down all the other factors. But I don't know about you. I still one of my favorite things to do when I'm watching a presentation is scroll through and just watch people look at the presentation. And maybe I'm weird that way. I probably am. So that's already out of the bag. There you go. You know I'm weird. But it's fascinating because when we think people aren't watching, what are we doing? And so it's interesting because you're under view all the time. There's a little bit of pressure for that. If I have my video on, I know that people could be viewing me at any time. And sometimes, I don't know about you, I forget my camera's even on. And I'll go do something and I'll be like, I left my camera on. Everybody saw that, or at least a few people that might have been looking saw that, right? And there's some pretty funny videos if you haven't seen about Zoom and faux pas that occur over Zoom, right? So I hope as you're attending webinars, as you're attending big meetings, maybe your own consultation team meeting if you're part of a consultation team. But then the other thing is when you're just doing therapy, it's you and that other person. So there are some benefits to that because it's just you and that other person speaking to one another. You're not having to gauge everything else that might be happening with the 20 other people in the room or whatever that might be. But again, you can see how all these factors are very different than we deal with if I'm sitting in a large room with people. A lot of those barriers are removed. I can see their nonverbals. I have a pretty good view of them. There's so much more I can pick up on as I'm looking at all that group of faces. So if you're tired of watching the Brady Bunch, we'll move on now. But those really are kind of the things that we know lead to Zoom fatigue, right? Again, it's the verbal cues missed. It's the nonverbal cues due to limited visibility. It's that gallery view. And I forget the settings on some of the other platforms that you might be using, but Zoom, it's called gallery view. And then again, kind of that anxiety or pressure of people maybe coming in and out. You remember on the first webinar, and I'm going to recap some of the webinars that we've done as I go through my information and share some of those or reshare some of that. But as if you remember on the first webinar we did, we talked about that pressure of knowing that, I mean, I am at home right now. And so the fact that I'm presenting to you from home, there's a little bit of nervousness on my part of like, when's my kid going to open the back door and you're going to see him pop in? And I hope we've gotten a little more cognizant and maybe forgiving of each other of that happening, because it certainly has happened to me. But that doesn't mean it's important that we're aware and that we know that all of those factors are what really are leading to this thing that we call Zoom fatigue, and that we know we're dealing with at times. So the good news is, despite the problem, there's things we can do to counteract it and be aware of it. But it's important for you to understand that piece and understand what some of the pressures are. I'm going to show you just a quick little clip. I liked this comic. This is a little support group. If anybody feels like they need to attend, I'll give you the location. But this little support group for Zoom fatigue that's occurring. And you know, it's just odd times, right? I still some days wake up and I'm like, are we really still doing this? Is this really what we're still finding ourselves in? And we are, right? It's not going away anytime soon. And I've had to practice a lot of radical acceptance in our new reality, right? And the new normal we're dealing with. So let me just show you this little video clip here. And I thought this was a really nice clip that does it a very succinct way, talks about Zoom fatigue, and then also some of the things we can counteract, and we'll talk about those. And it's kind of a fun video. He does a good job.
One look, and then my heart went boom.
You know what? Not everyone's heart goes boom for Zoom, because Zoom fatigue is a thing, and here's how to avoid it.
Yes, Zoom and the like are incredibly useful at times like this, but yourself. If fatigue is what you're feeling, then most likely yes. So what is it about Zoom, Team and other video calls that make us feel so tired? Well, there's probably quite a few reasons, but here's a few. Firstly, you're probably doing a lot of them. All that time that you used to spend traveling to meetings, well, you don't do that now, so why not pop another Zoom call into that slot? Well, you're in danger of doing just that because it looks like you have more available time now. Secondly, you can see yourself in Zoom calls, because as well as your other callers, there's you in all your glory looking back at you. And that's probably making us more self-aware and perhaps more self-conscious too, because you're now on stage all the time. Do that hour after hour, and it's no wonder it all feels a little wearing. Thirdly, silence. Because when there's silence in the dialogue, you find yourself wondering, did they not like what I said, or has the technology fallen over? And it only takes 1.2 seconds for you to start thinking that. Plus add the fact that you're probably not getting up and moving around as much as you normally would pre-COVID-19 times, and it can sometimes feel like an extended staring competition with a room full of strangers. Well, it's all a bit exhausting. So what can you do? Number one, sounds simple, but maybe ease back on the number of Zoom video calls that you're doing every day, and maybe chunk them up, maybe 2 or 3 in the morning and again in the afternoon, but max out there. And make sure you have at least 10 minutes between meetings so that you can move around and do something different. So maybe use 50 minutes out of the 60 available in an hour and use those 10 minutes for a walk, just something else. Number 2, are video chats the best option? Maybe a straight phone call will do. So you're not doing the visual interpretive work of trying to match the body language to what's being said all the time. Number 3, use a background. Opening up your home can feel like it's a bit like opening up your home for others to view. You might be fine with that, or you may not be. It can trigger some social comparison worries. And if your kids are using Zoom, then they might not prefer to have people prying around at stuff behind them either. Number 4, use speaker view. That way you don't need to have the self-consciousness of always monitoring yourself, and you can just turn down that feeling of being stared at by a room full of strangers the whole time, just a few people, or one. And lastly, just remember, everything feels pretty exhausting at the moment. Be kind to yourself. If you're also socializing using video chat, again, ask yourself, how much of one communication channel can you deal with in your life right now? Change it up, switch it around, and make sure you get some variety in how you communicate. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, then check out this one too. I think you'll like it. I'm Saab Johal. Catch you next time.
Sorry, I just did one of my Zoom faux pas. I started talking when I was on mute, but I'm back now. Has anybody experienced that before, right? So those are the other things we're dealing with Zoom fatigue. But I thought that video did a pretty good job of talking about and going through, again, some of those things that we're dealing with, right? Some of the pieces that we're struggling with. I like some of the suggestions, and we'll talk about those in a minute. But it is this idea, and I don't know about you, but when I'm presenting now, I am literally staring at myself the whole time. And so when we think about, I think about we heard from Duke when they presented some of, they talked about some of that shame exposure it provides for us, but some that it provides for our clients, right? Because it's not just us that are viewing ourselves, it's our clients that are viewing themselves as well. And for a lot of people, that's hard. You think about mirror work we did when we were in the office, and for a lot of people, mirror work could be really tough. Well, mirror work is happening all of the time during the whole session. And so those are some of the exposures that we're now having or dealing with that we also weren't before, right? And so again, you can see how the Zoom fatigue piles up. One of the comments in one of the presentations that was made is she thought I thought I used to be a pretty expressive person, right? And that people would see me and they understood what I was saying. And I was pretty emotive. And they're like, now since doing therapy over Zoom, I've had to be 10 times what I thought I was. So I guess in one way it's been good skill development because we're working on our expressions, how we're presenting or coming off to our clients. The other part, I don't know about you, but I find myself exhausted at times because I am working so hard expressing myself. I had, when we do these presentations, I'm constantly getting feedback how it's going. And one of the feedback was like, Brad, you need to smile more, right? And so that's what I tried to do, is just smile more. But I'm like, man, I used to think I smiled quite a bit, but maybe I don't. Maybe I've stone faced too much. And so you can see we kind of go through these things over and over and over. And it kind of leads to some of that Zoom fatigue. He gave some really good ideas and suggestions of what we can do. We'll talk about that. But first and foremost, probably the first suggestion I really like is mindfulness. And there's some things we can do with mindfulness that will really help us. I have shared this previously. I'll share it again if you weren't on some of the other webinars. This place here is one of my favorite places to go visit. This is called Havasupai. It's down in the middle of the Grand Canyon. You get down there, it's 10 miles down, either by hiking or mule or helicopter. It's the only way in. It's an old Indian reservation down there. But Supai Havasupai stands for the people of the blue-green water. And you get down there and it's just this incredible place. And the water really is that green and blue and beautiful. And it's kind of like this little oasis down in the Grand Canyon that you'd never dream is down there. So when I think of a mindful place, this is the place I think about. And I think he highlighted in that video some really interesting things that we deal with. Some of those being that I have found, this was, my colleague said this to me the other day. He's like, I miss getting on an airplane and traveling somewhere to do our work when we would travel or do some things out of state. And I'm like, why? I'm like, you have so much more time now. He's like, yeah, I have time, but all my time's now filled with more virtual events than it ever has been, right? Whether it's virtual tours or virtual meetings with clients or whatever it was. He's like, all of a sudden, my travel time got eaten up and is now what's taken its place is more virtual events over. So he's like, not only am I traveling, but I'm also doing all the other things I was doing. And it's created more of this. And I think some of you may have felt this a little bit where, we used to, and maybe some of you have done better at this than others, but a 50-minute session is a 50-minute session. And it's just one of those simple tips that, okay, I'm going to be mindful that I'm going to keep my sessions to time of 50 minutes rather than I may squeeze it on both ends. And then before, I may have even had a little bit of a gap where I'd get up, I'd go to the bathroom, I'd go get my client out of the waiting room. Now I actually don't have to get up. I can just sit here, take all the 10-minute time of that gap, and then I sit here and I start the next call right away. And I don't take time to go for a walk, get a drink, some of those things that actually were really helpful for us. And I think that's where the mindfulness piece comes in, right? I'm going to be mindful of that 10-minute window and that 10-minute time of the 50-minute window, have that 10-minute gap. I'm also going to be mindful of the need that I need to get up. When I'm walking, I'm walking. When I'm getting a drink, I'm getting a drink, and allow myself to have that minute to kind of decompress or have that time. That's something I've found that has been really critical and helpful to do. And maybe you have enough time that you start a mindfulness. Maybe you do a mindfulness with your client. I know that's been one thing that's really helped me too. When I'm in a larger group for a meeting, almost like I had to do for the Brady Bunch, I will actually sit and mindfully look at each person that's in the room. And even though I may not be able to verbally greet them, I may send a wave, whether they see me or not, but I'm just taking a minute to account for everybody that's in that room, be mindful of who they are and what our connection is. And then I'm able to be more present for that call. I think there's some other real challenges. Some of you might be doing it right now. When I'm on virtually, I actually added additional computer. So I have the one I'm speaking to you now, and then I have a whole nother computer sitting here. And guess what I tend to do when I'm attending something like this? I sit and answer emails and I sit and do work, right? And so it's that idea of, and I think this is one of the things that has led to some of that fatigue, is maybe multitasking has become more common for us when we really need to actually be mindful of the moment and we're in, or the thing that we're attending to. And so that's some of the advice, right? Is we pull away and we don't multitask, because that's partly what's leading to some of that fatigue that we're having. The other thing I've done, I haven't always been really great about taking lunch for myself or having a lunch time. And it's probably gotten worse since COVID-19. The other thing that I've done now is I'll sit and eat while I'm attending meetings. And it's not that I didn't do that before, but if I did that before, it was in a conference room with a group of people. And typically we weren't doing work. We were just talking and checking in with each other, or we at least had time where that was built into the agenda, that we would do that just naturally, coming and going in the room, getting your meal, that kind of thing. Well, now we've become a little more efficient in some ways, because our time on those meetings, if it's a clinical meeting or whatever it might be, okay, maybe I'm eating, but actually all we're doing is we just get in, we don't check in with each other a whole lot, we just do work, and then we're right back out of that window while I'm still eating. So you think about some of those natural transition times that we had built into our day or into our work, even driving from location to location, whatever it might have been. I would just say those are the things to really be mindful of and be attuned to, that may or may not be missing in your schedule and the things that you're going through. And really, that's what we know is helping to combat some of that Zoom fatigue, is having those things built in. So being mindful or aware of that, I think, is another critical piece. And then of course, you all know this, but don't forget the research and how good it is. Just practicing mindfulness 10 minutes a day goes a really long way, and we know we reap the benefits. And again, just as by way of reminder, the benefits for healthcare workers: we're more empathetic people, we're better able to handle silence, we're more attuned to the people around us and the people that we're working with and our clients, and to our colleagues. Less stress, less anxiety, all of those things, again, we know are the benefits of mindfulness and to be aware of. So those are kind of the things we talk through, right? I've hit these. We start the session with mindfulness. That could be one way to do it. I love to do that anyways. Some that are practicing as DBT clinicians, I think that's a great way to start a session, or even just work that in for skill generalization as we're working on that. Keep your sessions to 50 minutes, take that 10-minute break. I talked about this earlier. use the speaker view versus the gallery view, that does make a big difference. I've noticed you can practice it while you're with me. Click on gallery view, click on speaker view. It's a very different experience, right? As you're going through. And then avoid the tendency to multitask. We talk about that. I think about therapy interfering behavior. I've created a lot of new therapy interfering behaviors since using Zoom that I didn't have before. And I've had to be more mindful of those. Again, some of that is that maybe I get distracted, I pull away and I try to multitask. It could just be simply that one thing that I've done is I try to do sessions outside. That's really positive, but it also can become therapy interfering in some ways, because as I'm sitting on my screen outside, I notice myself pulling attention away from the person I'm to be attending to, and I actually start to look at the scenery outside and just enjoy it. Or I may notice a bird that flies up. And you have to decide, okay, how do I do that in a way that's not therapy interfering, and be aware of that. I don't know about you, but I've tried to, sometimes looking at my background can be a bit distracting for people. If you've ever used or experimented with any of the backgrounds that are available on Zoom, there's some that can be just as distracting. So again, being mindful and aware of the ones that I'm using. Maybe even having a conversation with the client. Hey, is this background okay? Is this, that kind of thing, and being aware of that. And then it's just that last idea, we think about validation and the validation principles. It really is just truly being with the people that I'm with, right? And truly being with the people that are in that session with me. And it is kind of that V1, V2 level of validation that I truly am just physically, I can't be physically, so I'm physically digitally present with those individuals, right? That's kind of that V1 validation that we learn and teach clients as we go through. So I think being aware of all those are critical pieces. I just by way of reminder, I wanted to highlight or point out the benefits of mindfulness and kind of go through these, or benefits of telehealth, sorry, and go through these with you, because I think over the last several webinars we've had, people have done a really nice job of highlighting what some of these benefits. There were some I had been doing, but had not consciously thought of, oh, this really is one of the amazing things. And I think this is the one that stood out to me, maybe partly the most, that we heard in the webinar series, and that we had some really nice case study examples of how we're doing it. But it really has been this nice merging of the phone coaching and the therapy session being brought together. Because before, we do phone coaching, then they'd come meet with us in the session, then we get on the phone and do phone coaching per DBT and that model and that what we're following, and we're working to help them generalize skills. Well, all of a sudden, this ability to work with the client in their own home environment through an individual session and through via video opened up this whole new world. And we heard some really nice examples in some of the previous webinars from several people. I know Duke also went through it, and some of their people, was just that exposure that can be completed in the moment, right? Now all of a sudden, the thing that we're needing to do exposure with, we're actually there, they're in their home environment, and we can actually complete the exposure during the session while we're doing that session. And so it's opened us up really to some really kind of this nice blending, and I would say the function, or the highlight that function of, we now are able to help our clients generalize their skills in the environment that they're in while we're there with them and able to coach them to do it. And then we talked about this, right? We're all being exposed at some level to now viewing ourselves in the video. I see myself presenting to you. I see what that looks like. You see yourself. When I'm meeting with the client, they're viewing themselves. And so I found it's really important that I take the time to be mindful of that and talk about that with my client. Hey, and I'll highlight that fact. If I'm intentionally trying to do some exposure, I'll highlight the fact that they're viewing themselves. The other thing the research is showing, people are actually spending the most time watching themselves than they are the other people. So I think that's really interesting research. we like to look at ourselves. There's just, or it's really hard to look at ourselves, but either way, we're exposed to it, right? So on the one hand, I may really enjoy looking at myself. On the other hand, I may have a lot of shame, but I'm being exposed to that more than I ever have, which then can lead to that Zoom fatigue. So I think being aware of that is so critical, right? I appreciate somebody's comment, just such serious exposure to seeing myself in session. I agree 100%. Honestly, you think about, I don't know about you, but in my training in grad school, and I still deal with this, for so long, we all tried to avoid videotaping sessions for that very reason. I didn't really want to see what I looked like during the session, even though I knew it made me better. There was just such exposure there that I'd be given to, right? And so that's the other piece. This has really taken that barrier down, where okay, I've got myself in session now, and I'm seeing it, and I'm seeing what it looks like. And then just, we talked about this, it really has opened us up to some really nice in vivo skills coaching that can occur in the session. You know, I've heard some, and we heard in the webinar series, some really nice examples of people doing coaching. For example, hey, you know, we're talking about interpersonal effectiveness in the session. They're saying, hey, I really was struggling with my mom. And you just say, hey, is your mom there with you? Yeah, she's actually in the kitchen. Well, go grab your mom. Let's practice together real quick, right? I mean, that's been incredible to be able to have more opportunities like that present themselves and be open. And I'm sure you felt and seen that. And then there is a level of convenience that is so nice. I have counted how, and I live in a really, we live in St. George, Utah, southern Utah, which is small. We don't really have traffic, but I do have a little bit of travel time between locations. When I'm not doing that or having to do that, I'm saving upwards to an hour of travel time every day that I actually have back. Now, it's really easy, like we talked about, it's really easy to take that travel time, not be mindful of it, and just fill it with more work or more Zoom meetings, which leads to the problem compelling and continuing and feeding itself. But the other part of that is, if I'm really mindful and conscious, I'm like, hey, I actually have 30 minutes that I'm just going to go walk around the neighborhood and appreciate what's there, because I did gain that time due to the lack of travel. You know, and for clients, it's been the same. I've had people, especially in your higher traffic area, metropolitan areas, that have told me, you know, they've been saving 2 to 3 hours commute time just from not having to travel. So you think about, for your client, how beneficial that can be. And I think we need to highlight that, talk about it with them, help them be mindful of that increased time and what they're doing with it, so that they're doing things that are skillful, just like we expect ourselves to do things that are skillful, and be aware of that same time for ourselves, right? There was, even though there was some negative to that travel time, sometimes there was positive, because I'd put in my favorite music and I'd drive home. By the time I got home, I left home at home and I left work at work, and it helped me have that transition time that at some level has gone missing, or I've had to be a lot more conscious of. And then again, you know, we talked about just using technology to teach skills. So what I want to do is just highlight for you some resources. Some of you, we've shared these already. We've talked about these. I'm going to go through them a little bit, just so you're well oriented to what some of these resources are. I have found this to be extremely helpful to actually share. You know, the nice thing is, as you saw me do already, is I shared a video with you over Zoom. We sat and watched that video together. It aligned us well. We were able to take and look at the skill. So what I want to show you, or just orient you to really quick, is this video here that we've got. And that's available to you as a resource. So if you go to, and I'm intentionally showing you this whole screen, but if you go to the Sunrise RTC, and some of you have already done this, maybe RTC YouTube channel, you can get on there, and we've got a lot of skills videos that I hope will be a resource to you, and hopefully will be helpful for you. But I found them really helpful in that, you know, I'm able to share media and I'm showing that media to those that I'm working with or helping. So one skill that I want to talk about, and we'll actually watch this video just so you get some exposure, but you can see here the videos that are available to you, and the skills videos, what we've done. The one video I was going to show you is tip. It's interesting as to combat Zoom fatigue, I found myself in those transition times actually using tip. And so the one thing that, and I don't know about you, but because we're limited, a lot of the things that we've been able to use to deal with stress or that we've maybe gone to, whether it be going out to eat, going to locations, in-room dining, whatever it could be, I have never seen so many people in my neighborhood out walking around as I have now. And some of you have maybe seen that yourselves, but I'm just going to show you an example of tip. This would be a way that I would share this with a client. I'll share it with you, but I think it's a great way to combat Zoom fatigue and be aware of it. And I'll just show you this quick video because again, the fact that we have this ability to share, whether it be the chalkboard, whether it be the whiteboard, whatever it is, the whiteboard we now have and we can use with our clients. And I can show you, you know, some of you have used that as well, but I'll show you this video on tip real quick. I think it's a good example of how you can use media to help.
Are you at your emotional breaking point, about to do something you might regret? Remember the DBT skill TIP. TIP stands for temperature, intense exercise, paced breathing, and paired muscle relaxation. When you're feeling upset, try changing your body temperature. Splash your face with cold water or hold an ice cube to focus your mind on something else. Engage in some intensive exercise, such as sprinting or a good workout at the gym, to help increase oxygen flow to the brain and reduce the anxiety and stress you feel. Paced breathing will stop the fight or flight shallow breathing response. Breathe in with your diaphragm, taking in air for 6 seconds. Hold for 7, then breathe out 8. Pause 4 seconds, and then start again until you feel more calm. This can be done with any breathing exercise. Focus on a group of muscles, like your arms, and alternate between tightening and relaxing the muscles. Paired muscle relaxation helps you let go of the tension in your body by relaxing your muscles. These skills can bring you down from your emotional ledge so you can handle the situation productively.
So I want to just show you that as an example. That you can get on there, get on that YouTube channel. You can see the videos. There's plenty of other videos that have been shared within the listserv that I think will be really helpful for you. You know, I noticed several schools or universities are actually publishing literature on Zoom fatigue and then putting it out to their students because they're dealing with it. University of Nebraska, I found a great resource from the University of Nebraska highlighting for students how they can deal with Zoom fatigue from the online classroom and some ideas. And it's very similar to the tips that we're talking about today. However, ours is more DBT focused since that's what we're oriented to and using. And so maybe we need to put out a DBT Zoom fatigue oriented flyer. Maybe we'll create one and pass that to everybody. I think that'd be fun. So the other thing I just want to show you, we talked about mindfulness and telehealth. On the listserv, we talked about this, and I will be sure that we also send it out to everybody with this in view. Let me just show you real quick. So this was the on the DBT listserv. This was one of the resources that was shared, and people did a phenomenal job sharing telehealth friendly mindfulness ideas. So Amy will remind me and we'll send these out to you. You're not going to see it in this slide version because I made this as small as possible so nobody can actually read it. So I hope that's really helpful to you. But you'll hopefully you got a little irreverence in my comment there and understand that I promise we'll get this to you and get you this source. I had to highlight that because man, you couldn't see my nonverbals through Zoom. It's so hard to know what I'm doing. I have to be more explicit than I've ever been, I find. So the other thing that this was another great thing. Portland DBT shared this on the listserv. and I loved this. They shared, this goes through DBT skills or skills that people in their group were using, and what they did that helped them. So this was take walks between sessions, before or after Zoom meetings, yoga, stretching. DBT skill that they highlighted was improve the moment, ABC please, self-soothe, mindfulness, accepts, right? They did a really nice job on this. And so I wanted to be sure you were aware of that resource, and that you had that highlighted. This one, let's see if I can get to it. This one was pretty funny. This little irreverent and so good. If you notice number 13 on here, what do I do to cope with Zoom fatigue or deal with COVID-19? I fart freely during sessions and consider muting audio. I thought that was why it's a rare chance, because when else are you going to have the chance, right? And so it's this idea of making lemonade out of lemons, or alternate rebellion. I thought it was a great idea of alternate rebellion. This one I thought was, I don't know about you, but sometimes I have meetings I have to dress up for. Do you know what the greatest benefit of meetings on Zoom? I only put a white shirt on if I have to get dressed up, and I dress from the waist up, and then I'm in like shorts or pajama bottoms and flip-flops. Amy was not kidding when she said I wear flip-flops all the time. And that has been one of the gifts of these telehealth meetings. I can wear flip-flops even when I'm supposed to look really professional. So that's kind of my alternate rebellion and kind of going through these. But I wanted you to be oriented to these that came through the list. We'll share these and pass these on as well. I know Portland DBT did a nice job on this. And you can see they did a really good job of highlighting, here's the skills. I believe they did this in their consultation team meeting. And so that was kind of the other thing I wanted to touch on. And you're familiar with this, but again, making sure in consultation team meeting, we can't stress enough how important it is. And many of you have taken your consultation meetings via video now and are participating that way. But it's just so critical we follow the agenda of consultation, right? That we remember those 4 agenda items that we're using, whether it's case consultation, support, validation, and problem solving, that we're sticking to that we're being phenomenological in our descriptions, that we're being non-pejorative, and that we're being as behaviorally descriptive and specific as possible in everything we're doing. Because knowing that my team may be feeling a little more Zoom fatigue, even getting on Zoom for another case, another consultation team meeting, it can be really important that we're adhering to those and following those, and making sure we're using consultation team meeting effectively, because we know that has been one of our, not only during this time, but anytime, just with the population we work with the emotional work we do, an effective consultation team meeting makes all the difference. And so I hope that you're utilizing that. That's just a refresher. Many of you are very familiar with those things that we do in consultation. But again, I find coming back to that agenda, that structure, and using those 4 things, and making sure when I'm putting myself on the agenda, I'm saying, okay, here's what I'm needing from the group. I'm needing support. And here's how I need the support from the team has been really important. So I thought this creative idea from Portland DBT, this was a great way that they supported one another in combating Zoom fatigue, but also just supporting each other in their effective consultation team meetings. So we will send that out so that you've got it. This is another thing. How many of you have had a dog or a cat jump in on your therapy sessions in the last little while? I mean, that's been a constant. And for a while, I was kind of annoyed by it because the cat would get right in front of the camera while we're trying to talk. And I've really learned to embrace it of like, no, how do I use this moment to actually help my client generalize their skill? And so we'll come back to, hey, no, this is about accepts. And this, man, the cat does a really nice job. This is about self-soothing. And I've actually invited my pets to the session, with clients' permission, and they've loved it, right? Before they didn't get to see my pets a whole lot because they weren't well trained or those kind of things. And they've been able to love having part of that. So there's been some more equal ground sharing that's occurred that we obviously want to have participate and happen in DBT and what we're doing that way. And then just by, these are just quick tips for effective telehealth, we've really talked through these, but I find if I'm prepared and mindful that I'm getting in telehealth, I'm doing technology, making sure all things are in place, that I've got my technology running well, making sure we have those things in place make a big difference. We'll send these out so you can look at them. But I liked those tips. And then I included this in here. We're not going to watch it today. This was from the first webinar or the second webinar we did. We talked about middle path. And that skill of middle path is really this idea that we're all being forced to this work-life integration. We used to be so focused on, some of us maybe even avoided phone coaching for this very reason of I didn't know how to have boundaries around work life. I didn't know how to balance it. And really we've been forced, now that many of us are working from home, we've been forced to now integrate our work and our life together. And there's a great, I think this is a good middle path framework, is what's called work-life integration. And you can learn more about it, but it is essentially what it sounds like, is that there's seasons in our work life, things will fluctuate and come. And the key is, how do I integrate it in such a way that's helpful for me? And then the example that I used, of course, was the NBA players were really good examples. There was a company that made hoops, or basketball hoops. They found out that over 70 NBA players didn't have a basketball hoop at home. And the reason they didn't have one at home is they didn't want to mix work and home life together. And they had kids. I mean, these are NBA players that have kids, but playing basketball had become such a part of work, they didn't want to bring it home with them. So this company found this out when people had to stay home, and they sent them over 70 basketball hoops to NBA players because they had to have a way to practice at home. And I think there's a lot of things like that we maybe need to work on integrating and using middle path to help us in our own lives and kind of go through that. And so just be aware of those things, are the critical pieces. I think I went through all the resources. Again, we'll email these out. I thought they were really helpful, and just coming up with here's how I'm using DBT skills during this time for myself, for my colleagues, but also with my clients, and being aware of that. So I know we're very close to time. I'll open up for questions, see if there's any questions anybody has, and then we'll wrap up with you.
Brad, we did have one question. Do you know of any resources for clearly explaining a behavioral chain analysis in video form? Do you know of any behavioral chain videos?
That is a really good question. I have seen some come across, so we will send those out with you with that. The thing that I've found people use is the chalkboard. People have mentioned, or not, sorry, the chalkboard, the whiteboard within the Zoom feature has been probably one of the most widely used, and has been really helpful because you can write everything up right as you're working together, and you can actually give permission so your client can write it up with you as well. And so that's extremely helpful, that a lot of people use. Yeah, the question was, where is that? I will, in fact, I will find a little YouTube video that explains that whiteboard feature to you, and we'll send that out with this. So Amy, if you'll remind me on that,
Yep,
I think that'll be really helpful. And then I'll see if I can find one necessarily that's nailed down with someone actually demonstrating how they use it for teaching behavior chain analysis. So you've got that as well. So great question.
Says, I work with teens in an IOP, wondering if you have any suggestions about talking about COVID with this population in a group setting.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I don't know about you, but I spend, being an administrative position at Sunrise, I spend so much time talking about COVID-19. In fact, I think I've presented on COVID-19 itself and mitigation and things we're doing probably 10 times already, just to the external, and then internally we're doing it like crazy. So we do have some resources, and Amy, if you'll remind me, I will send that with this as well. In terms of, it may overwhelm you in resources or ways to talk about it with teens, but we do have some really nice resources. And in fact, the thing that I found most helpful is to talk about some of the changes that they're experiencing or dealing with. We've done that in our DBT groups. And we've actually done a very similar thing that I'm doing with you today. I've talked about some of maybe the Zoom fatigue they felt, and then also gone through, and I've shared a lot of these resources about specific, here's DBT skills that help combat that. And they actually have come up with better ideas than I had too, of things they've done to help combat, and the way they've generalized their skills specifically in regards to Zoom fatigue that have been really helpful. And then if you're wanting more kind of a medical way to talk about it, we do have just some infection control stuff that we've shared with our group, just as we've tried to mitigate risk and gone live again with some of them. I know that's a challenge that many of you are dealing with is, okay, now how do I phase back into live time with my clients? And reassuring them, but also making sure we got the protocols in place as well. I'm happy to share some of that with you too. So great question.
Well, it looks like we got all of the questions. If you have any more, please type them in the chat in the next couple minutes. But thank you all so much for the time that you have taken with us and the webinar. Will the listserv be sent to us as well? I'll make sure that we're sending all of the resources that are on the listserv with the webinar slides. I will also make sure that all of the previous webinars and their videos and recordings and slides are sent out after this recording. But we have just really appreciated all of the collaboration that we've had with everyone across the nation who has joined this webinar. It has been fun. It has been a blast being able to share what we have learned and learn from you guys. And we just want to thank you so much for the time you're taking with us and have taken with us.
Yeah, the other thing I will add, there's a website, if you're not familiar with it, it's called, now I've got to remember, but if you type in and look up under Google, and we'll send the link, but it's the DBT Therapist Wiki. It's where a lot of this is getting shared. So I will have Amy share the link with you for that, so you've got it as well. That'll give you a lot of these resources that we're talking about and give you a place that you can dig in more too. Yeah, thank you. Practiceground.org, and then you go to DBT Therapist Wiki. So many of you are familiar with that. If you're not, we'll share that as well, so you're oriented. But yes, thank you all for joining us, for being on these webinars with us. It's been amazing to learn from colleagues and work, and we hope we'll be able to do something again at some point. We may do something more in regards to how do we phase back into live sessions with COVID-19, and doing something down the road with that, I think might be beneficial. So we hope to just keep these going at some point, be able to bring those back and maybe start a new series addressing those pieces. So anyways, thank you everybody for joining us. And thanks, Amy, for all you've done.
Yep. Thank you all. Have a great week.
Thank you, everyone. We'll get this sent out to you.